So, do you ever feel like maybe you're just not good enough, or you had a past experience and it didn't work out the way you wanted it to, or just you look at yourself and you see your insecurities and problems, and so, well, no, I can't do that. I'm not good enough. No, I tried that before and it didn't work out. Well, I think we've all been there, and one person I want to look at today who did that is probably one of the greatest leaders who ever lived, and that would be Moses. So when Moses first was called, he did not want the job at all. So you probably know this story. Towards the end of the book of Genesis, we have Jacob, who God had named Israel, and there was famine in the land, and he thought his son Joseph had died, but ends up Joseph had been taken captive and raised up to be mightiest under Pharaoh in all of Egypt, and was able to provide for the family and save them. So they all moved to Egypt and were there given the land of Goshen to live in with Joseph. And so now about 400 years go by as we get to the book of Exodus. And if we think about that, that's longer than the United States has been a country. So you can imagine how much these people grew. A lot of people are born in 400 years. Family's really growing. And so there's lots and lots of just disdain among the Egyptians. There's all these Hebrews. What do we do with them? They're so numerous, we're scared of them. And so they decide, well, we need to do something about this. So first they put them under harsh labor, but that only made them produce more children. So then Pharaoh commanded the midwives that when they went to help the Hebrew women give birth, that they were supposed to kill any male child born, but let the girl children live. Well, the midwives feared God, and so they didn't do that. And they told Pharaoh that, well, you know what, the Hebrew women are so vigorous that they give birth before we even get there. So God granted them favor and gave them families of their own. So then Pharaoh's like, okay, what do I do now? All right, any male child that's been born has to be thrown down the Nile River. So we come to Moses' parents. They have a male child. They have Moses. They have to throw him down the Nile River. So the mother keeps him for 3 months. And then she decides to do what's been commanded. So she puts him in a basket and covers it and sends him down the river. And sure enough, Pharaoh's daughter happens to be bathing that day, and she opens this basket and sees this baby crying, and her heart just melts for this baby. Well, Moses' sister was watching the basket from the riverbank, so she goes and tells the princess, do you want me to find one of the Hebrew women to nurse and take care of the baby for you? Oh yeah, that'd be great, and I'll pay her for it. So Moses' own mom gets to get paid to raise him until he's old enough to be taken into basically the castle where the Pharaoh lived. So a lot of years go by, and Moses is being raised. He's getting all the best education, all the best resources, everything that Egypt has to offer, but he still knows his heritage. He knows who he was as an Israelite. So he's out one day, and by this point, he's 40 years old. I don't think we always grasp that in the story. So he's 40 years old at the point when he sees an Egyptian slave master beating up this Hebrew slave. And he doesn't like what he sees. And he decides, I'm going to take action. So he looks this way and he looks that way, and hey, there's no one looking. So he kills the Egyptian slave master who was just brutally beating up this Hebrew slave. He buries the body, thinks no one saw it, I'm all good. But then he goes back a short while later and he sees a couple of the Hebrews arguing with each other, and he's like, hey, what are you doing? Why are you arguing with your brother? And they're like, what, you gonna kill me like you killed the Egyptian? And he was struck with fear. What I did has become known. And then he realizes Pharaoh found out as well, and Pharaoh wanted to kill him. So Moses flees the country, and he goes to Midian. And he finds a wife, and he has a family. And he's there with them, tending flocks, taking them out, doing stuff for 40 years. So he's 80 years old. So if you ever think you're too old for God to use you or to call you, or for something in your life to change, guess what? Never too old. 80 years old. All right, so he's been doing this for 40 years now, taking the flocks out, letting them graze and whatever, and then he sees something he's never seen before. He sees this bush that's on fire, but it's not being burnt up. What would you do? I've never seen anything like that before. I'm out here all the time. I've been doing this for 40 years. I have never seen anything like that. I gotta go check that out. So Moses goes and checks it out. God had heard the crying and the pleading of the people, and he remembered them. And when God remembers, he acts. Not always in the time frame we would like, but God is faithful and he acts. So God lays out for Moses at the burning bush his plan of what he wants to do, of how he wants to rescue the people, and how he wants to use Moses as a leader to do that. So God lays out this plan to deliver the people, and he says, now go. So now Moses responds. We're in Exodus 3, verse 11. God says, go. What's Moses' response? Who am I? God told me to do something, but wait a minute, who am I? I'm looking at myself now. I'm looking at my insecurities. I'm looking at my past. God, you remember I tried to do something before, like 40 years ago, and that didn't work so well. And you want me to go and deliver the people now? Wait a minute, who am I? Do you know my giftings and abilities and things? Wait a minute here. I can't do this. Looking at myself fills me with doubt and anxiety. Who am I? So we would want God, if that was us, to give us a big pep talk, right? Like if we were an athlete, we want the coach to give us a pep talk. Come on, tell me how great I am. That's not what God does. God doesn't tell Moses how great Moses is. No, God responds, I will be with you. We want to know how great we are. But God doesn't give us that pep talk. God responds, I will be with you. Is that good enough for us to know that God is with us? Or are we still wondering, well, who am I? We might be having doubts about ourselves, but is it about me and trusting that you are with me? So Moses then asks, well, if they want to know who sent me, what do I say? And God gives his name. I am that I am. The name of Yahweh is given. It's a personal name. And he reminds the people of his covenant with them that he is the God of Abraham, of Isaac, and of Jacob. And, you know, names reflected a lot in this culture. A name really meant something. It meant who you were, where you were from, something like that. So it often referred to your character or your birthplace. So the name God gives expresses his character as faithful and dependable. So Moses knows that God will be with him. He knows that God is faithful and dependable. And now we're in Exodus chapter 4, verse 1. So Moses comes back to, well, what if they don't believe me? Yeah, that's nice that you're with me, God. It's nice that you're faithful and dependable, but what if they don't believe me? He's still looking at himself. Once again, how often do we look at ourselves? We're stuck on who am I? I'm stuck on what if. How many what ifs do we have in our lives? What if things don't go the way I planned them to? What if I don't get the raise I was hoping to get? What if I lose my job altogether? What if I get sick? What if someone dies? What if? There's so many what ifs in life. And Moses is doing that right now. What if? What if they don't believe me? What if I run into obstacles? Well, God answers by showing his power. Take that staff you have in your hand, throw it down. It becomes a snake. Pick it back up, it becomes a staff again. Take your hand and put it inside your cloak and pull it out. Now it's all leprous. Now he puts it back and brings it back out, and his hand is whole again. Draw some water from the river Nile and pour it out, and it's now blood. So God shows him his power. No matter what obstacles we face, we have the God who is with us, we have the God who is faithful and dependable, and we have the God who has given us his power to be able to face any obstacle. After seeing his staff turn into a snake and into a staff again, after seeing his hand become leprous and then normal again, Moses is charged up, he's ready to go, yeah, God, right? No, he's not at all. Exodus 4 verse 10, hold on, God, wait a minute, I'm not eloquent, I'm slow of speech. It's nice that you are all these things, but I'm still remembering who I am. I'm not eloquent, I'm slow of speech. Moses is full of reluctance. He's trying at every turn to disqualify himself. I'm back to focusing on me. Wait a minute, God. You can't ask me to do that. That's not my gifting. That's not my personality. Don't you know how I've tried that stuff before? And if I tried before and it didn't work, well, why would I try that again? We can become so cynical. We can become so full of fear. And yet God, who is with us, who's faithful and dependable, who's shown us his power, says, you know what? I'm with you. You can do this. Stop looking at yourself. You know, so often we hear the term how we put God in a box, and that is very true. But you know who else we put in a box a lot of times? Ourselves. This is what I'm good at. This is what I'm not good at. This is what I can do. Other people have told me I'm not good at that, so maybe I shouldn't do that. I've been told I can't succeed doing that, and we buy into it. We put ourselves in a box so often. I still remember back when I was in college, a friend of mine, Nick Gonzalez, he was working for a company and they had a booth at one of those trade fairs that they have in Las Vegas. And they set up their booth and they needed to run electricity to it, but there was no outlet near where the booth was. So, because everything, I don't know if it's still this way, it might be, but at least then, everything was unionized. And so in order to get just an extension cord, they had to hire someone, I don't remember the title, to get the extension cord and to lay it out from their booth all the way to wherever the outlet was. But that person was not allowed to plug in the extension cord because that was not part of their job description. And Nick and his team working there wasn't allowed to do it either because of the constraints of the union rules. So then they had to hire an electrician to come to plug in the extension cord because only an electrician could handle something that dealt with electricity. So this was over 20 years ago, and they had to pay $150 just to have an extension cord so they could have electricity for the little bit of time they were at their booth. Seems silly, right? But yet how often do we do that? I'm pretty good at laying out the cord, but I'm not so good about giving the power to it. I'd rather be more behind the scenes. No, I like doing this, but not the other part. What if it doesn't fit into my job description? What I think my gifting, my personality, what I'm good at is. Moses says he's slow of speech. And God responds, I will help you. I'll give you the words to say. You are still doubting yourself. You're still doubting your abilities. I will get you through this. It's not about your abilities, it's about me. You think by now Moses would get it and go, right? Sadly, Exodus chapter 4, verse 13, Moses says, Lord, please send someone else to do it. And God became angry with him and all of his excuses. One of the greatest leaders in history who would lead over 1 million people out of Egypt did not want the job. Full of doubt, focused on himself, his circumstances, challenges he would face, his own inabilities. I don't think I can make it. How often are we like Moses? Consumed with what I think I'm good at, what I think I can do, what I've been told I can or can't do, what my abilities, my circumstances dictate. And yet we let it affect our outlook. Each day we have to make a choice. Will I be consumed with myself and my circumstances, or am I going to take a different perspective? Here's a fork. Pretty simple, right? We all use these Probably every day, unless you're having finger foods. Well, thanks to all the movies we've had out there, especially like the Disney ones, I think it's not far-fetched for us to imagine a fork coming to life and speaking, especially if you've seen maybe Beauty and the Beast, where all the cups and everything are talking. Well, imagine if this fork could talk. Imagine if it could speak. And what if it decided, you know what, I am not good enough for steak. Yeah, that's nice, you made a nice steak there, but I'm not good enough for steak. But you can use me for those vegetables over there. Seems silly, right? Or, you know what, vegetables and steak are nice, but I only want to be used for dessert. Dessert's pretty sweet. I want to be used for the sweet stuff. Not for that other stuff that you have to it's harder to pierce into. I want that nice soft dessert that I'm gonna cut into. So what is the role of a fork? Not to pick and to choose what it's used for, but to be guided by the hand that moves it. How often are we like that fork I described? God, I only want the sweet stuff. I only want the simple job. I only want the big job, whatever it might be for you. Instead, will I just be guided by the hand that would move me? When your eyes are fixed on yourself and your circumstances that surround you, you're going to have doubt. You're going to have anxiety, anger, depression, filling your heart, filling your mind. You're going to have fear. Life's going to be hard. It's going to be difficult. Or we can day by day choose to place our trust in the God who is with us, the God who is faithful and dependable, the God who has given us his power to overcome every obstacle. So it really comes down to, am I going to focus on me? Or God, am I willing to trust you? Am I willing to focus on you? Aren't you glad God didn't give up on Moses? We probably would have given up on Moses. One of the greatest leaders ever tried to disqualify himself at every step. Who am I? I can't do it. I'm slow of speech. I still don't want the job. Find someone else. And yet, one of the greatest leaders ever. It is a struggle in our mindset that everyone struggles with. Life's pain can become so overwhelming that we despair. Even the Apostle Paul in 2 Corinthians 1, verse 8 and 9 states that the persecution in Asia was so intense that he despaired even of life. Yet by shifting his focus to his life-sustaining God, he became resilient instead of overwhelmed, and learned that we should not trust ourselves, but in God. By putting our trust in God, we gain an entirely different perspective. God's grace is all-sufficient, and in our weakness is precisely the opportunity for his power to be displayed. Several years ago, I had received a devotional email that had this story, and I just wanted to read it to us here. I don't know her real name, but Smiley is one of about 200 men and women who live in a leper colony near one of our church-sponsored orphanages in a rural village of India. Leprosy has ravaged her body, leaving her with no toes, no fingers, and a death sentence. Cows, chickens, and goats roam the dirty, rugged roads in front of her thatched roof shack. This precious woman does not enjoy the luxury of running water and electricity, and food is scarce. Personally, I could see very little that Smiley had to smile about, but it was her radiant smile that caught my attention and tugged at my heart. She sat in front of me in the dirt, waiting for a message from God. I think the message was mine to hear. We had come to bring her joy and hope, but she already had both. After the service, I wrapped this precious woman in as big a hug as I could possibly give, because she was so rarely touched by others. With the help of an interpreter, we celebrated the truth that one day she will once again have all her toes and fingers. One day she will be well and whole. She laughed like a little girl at the promise of being with Jesus and living with him in heaven. Smiley has fixed her eyes on the unseen and found joy and hope in the process. She does not depend upon the temporary things of this world for contentment. Hope gives her the strength to get up each morning and begin her daily search for food. The promise of heaven comforts her each night when she lies down on a dirty mat to sleep. Smiley has nothing, and yet she has everything. Because she has learned and lives out the truth that inner joy does not depend upon outward circumstances. Joy is a deeply rooted confidence that God is in control, no matter how it looks on the outside. God's grace is all sufficient, and in our weakness is precisely the opportunity for His power to be displayed. How often do we focus on our circumstances and allow it to rule our emotions, allow it to rule who we are, allow something in the past to allow us to say, no, I can't do that again in the future, and we disqualify ourselves just like Moses did? Or we wouldn't be happy at all like Smiley, who has nothing but yet has everything because she has Jesus. We have the God who is with us. We have the God who is faithful and dependable. We have the God who has given us Himself, He's given us His power. Where will we place our focus? It really comes down to living with perspective. What perspective am I going to choose to live with each day? Lord, we thank You so much that You do not give up on us, that You didn't give up on Moses. He tried and tried and tried to tell You no, and yet You used him mightily, Lord. And we thank You that You don't color code history, that You show us it as it is so that we can learn and grow from it. Lord, may we not disqualify ourselves. May we not just say, who am I, and focus on ourselves, but may we, Lord, trust in You, for You are faithful and dependable. You are good, Lord. Thank You that You are with us at all times, and for Your awesome power. May we have hearts that are soft and minds, Lord, that are attuned to You, that we would listen and easily follow where You are leading, that we would not be quick to say no, but rather we would be quick to go as You would guide us. Thank You, Lord, so much.